GM, good morning. Welcome to the Milk Road Show, the daily crypto show that's smoother than your phone screen after peeling off the plastic for the first time. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton, and today we are joined by Piers Kicks, founding partner of Delphi Venture and lead of the gaming team at Delphi Digital. In today's episode, we are diving into the mind of one of the leading thinkers in the intersection of blockchain and gaming. Piers has been in this space for years and really has the understanding of where we're at. We've been talking about gaming and blockchain for years, but we haven't seen the activity that we all expected. We're all wondering, is that coming? Are we finally there? And today's episode is really going to give you guys a lot of insight into where we are now with blockchain and gaming, but also where we are going in the next 12 months is so exciting. And there's so much opportunity here for you guys to capitalize on. So buckle up, guys. This episode is going to be absolutely incredible. Before we jump in, we are hiring right now. If you guys love crypto, if you want to join the Milk Road team, we're looking for a new head of partnership, somebody that can help us grow our podcast, grow our newsletter, and be part of taking crypto to the next billion users. Click the link in the show notes, check out our career page, and apply today. Before we jump in, we're just going to take a moment to hear from our sponsors. Meanwhile is the world's first licensed and regulated life insurance company built for the Bitcoin economy. They do everything in BTC. You pay in BTC, they pay claims to your family in BTC. You take out policy loans entirely in BTC when you need liquidity. Protect your family from life's uncertainty and a broken financial system. Build intergenerational Bitcoin wealth while the cost of living skyrockets in dollar terms. Plus, get all the tax and legal benefits of life insurance now in Bitcoin. Visit milkroad.com/meanwhile to join the waitlist and get early access to the world's first Bitcoin life insurance. Piers, welcome to the Milk Road Show.
Hi, thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Man, super excited to have you, my man. Want to start off with gaming and blockchain. Feels like the most obvious marriage in the world, but yet we've not really seen it take off. Let's just start at the beginning. For those who have not thought about the intersection between gaming and blockchain, why does gaming and blockchain make so much sense when there's already billions of gamers in the world? They're not using blockchain and they're doing just fine.
Absolutely. I mean, I think at the kind of highest level, it's just this idea that these concepts that are very baked in and embedded in crypto, natively digital value, the stuff that was unlocked with NFTs in terms of like digital property rights and being able to have, basically provable digital scarcity on the internet for the first time. Many of us have long thought that the most obvious sort of intersection of, actual applications, basically where that would make sense and resonate with an audience is in games, right? People that have grown up spending, a shit ton of time exploring these environments, getting very involved in the economies around big MMORPGs, if you've ever played World of Warcraft or RuneScape or whatever. And yeah, now for the first time, you have, basically the technology to actually give users ownership of assets around video game economies. You look at something like a Fortnite that does, multiple $1 billion a year in revenue that's primarily driven by these like one-way microtransactions where people are actually just licensing skins basically from the game operator. You have like, you're treated, incredibly poorly in terms of like what you can actually do, your actual agency over those assets, right? You get banned if you try and sell your account. You get shut down. Obviously, there are gray markets that try and allow this stuff, but it's not really, endorsed at all. And so I guess, the highest level and most exciting part of this is like taking the demand that has been evidenced by the existence of these massive gray markets in orbit of all these major game economies and actually baking that straight into the game design itself and being like, actually, we're going to treat our users like grown-ups and we're going to understand that there's a huge amount of sort of like economic agency and complexity that can be unlocked by giving that power to the players. And, hopefully there's all sorts of interesting emergent behavior that comes with that too, which, remains to be seen basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll talk about some of that behavior. What is the size? Just give us an idea of the scale of these gray markets that exist today.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get accurate numbers on them, right? Because the reportings or whatever, but you can look into things like, sort of player auctions and some of these other like forums that exist around games. You can kind of infer like we're definitely talking like, billion-dollar markets in aggregate around various titles. And yeah, expect that to kind of continue to grow, basically. I mean, many people, some of your audience may be familiar with like the CSGO, like skin trading. That's a particular instance of where, there was an entire industry, a gambling industry that was built off the back of being able to basically use Counter-Strike Go skins as your like medium of exchange to like, basically go to all these casinos and stuff. Often they weren't really like KYCing users and stuff as you'd expect. And so it's pretty insane how elaborate lots of this has become. But as I say, difficult to get like concrete numbers on for obvious reasons.
Of course. But just as an order of magnitude, we are talking in the billions. And this is in gray markets where the friction would be enormous. It's not liquid. It's not global. It's not easy to do this stuff. And people are still making it happen. So you take that and put that on chain and think about how, the benefits are just so obvious. So let me ask you this next question. Why not yet? Why haven't blockchain and gaming taken off so far?
Well, I think first of all, there was obviously like the big trigger period, right? In which there was like this huge amount of speculation in the sort of like 2021 era of like, holy shit, this is actually a sort of possibility. And people really ran with a lot of that stuff, right? We saw these assets like run up massively. And basically we kind of just had a classic instance of, sort of expectations not really matching reality. Like the reality of game design is that, you're talking 2 to 3 years minimum to deliver like anything that's like, even like a remotely polished product. And obviously it's a very ADHD kind of industry that we live in. And so that difference between sort of the feedback loop of game design and what people have become accustomed to within the crypto markets is where a lot of the disappointment came from like a price action perspective. I think now, the question is very valid. So we're now, approaching like 3-4 years on from that. There's been literally, billions and billions of dollars going into funding, Web3 game studios. So like, where is everything? Where's the product? And so, I'm still wholeheartedly aligned with that question, right? I think these next 12, 18 months are a big kind of show and tell. Otherwise, we would have sort of start to run out of excuses, right? We've had the time, we've had like the dev cycle, we've had the funding now. And so, I think there's a lot riding on these next 12 to 18 months. But, we kind of like see a sort of bifurcation of like degree of integration of blockchain and like who those respective audiences are, right? So you can kind of think about this as a spectrum from like the very light touch, simplistic integration of what Off the Grid's building with Gunzilla that we'll get onto, right? Which is basically just marketplace technology, sort of in-game assets. Like every asset that enters the economy does exist on chain and it's like freely tradable beyond that. And then you can go to these, more kind of intermediary steps, right? Like I'm going to build a game that has certain economic loops that exist on chain. So one of the ones I like to cite recently is a game called Cambria, which is heavily inspired by old school RuneScape. And basically they've replicated something called the Duel Arena, which is where people used to stake, 50-50 odds, give or take, head to head, 1v1. And it's where many of us got addicted to gambling for the first time. And they basically built that, which is, all of the games off chain apart from these like smart contracts that do the escrow around the gambling piece. And so that's kind of like an interesting approach where you find a kind of niche where, there's like, for this one, it relies kind of heavily on the nostalgic element that draws people in. That's kind of, as I say, has the game all existing off chain and then some economic pieces on chain. And then, you can go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is this idea of like fully on-chain games, right? That all game state, all logic should exist on-chain. Obviously, there's huge like technical complexity that comes with this. We have all sorts of scaling constraints that make this like not really a reality yet. But if you zoom out and think about, people call it the autonomous worlds thesis, the idea that you can build these game environments that are infinitely composable. You can build different front ends to them. So you might have the same game state, but you might be in like a little candy candy universe and I might be in some demonic one, but that's like a pretty interesting idea as well. So we have all these different kind of avenues and kind of like degrees of integration we've seen so far.
So you think it's really just time then? We just haven't had enough time. Plus we also, as you said, live in a crypto world where everything needs to happen now and fast, otherwise attention goes elsewhere.
Totally. And sorry, what I meant to say as well, and talking through this like distinction is, I think there's been lots of like small success cases, right? Of
tell us about that. Yeah.
So like Cambria, right? It's very simple. I've given you guys the like overall of what it does, But just with that Jewel Arena product, right, they did $100 million in volume in the first 3 months, right, across base and blast. And so they have a 4% fee baked into that. 1.5% of that goes back to like player referrals to incentivize growth, but a 2.5% fee basically going to treasury. Like, by any measure, that's a success, right? That's an incredibly successful product. And it has, a relatively small audience. We're talking like thousands of players max. And so I think part of the beauty of crypto is that you can actually basically have these massive whale audiences that monetize way deeper than anything you'd even remotely like conceive of in traditional gaming. And that's still successful from like a monetary like numbers perspective, right? And so I think we have seen really cool stuff along the way. We've seen stuff like that world PvP game, right, where you had each country had its own token and people could bid up the market caps, and whoever was like in first place at the end of a given period would get to call in a tactical nuke and take the treasury of another country. That kind of stuff's really fun, but it's not your conventional like game success, like big flashy thing. What is the big game success? What is the big flashy thing? Well, I'm a big believer that that's Gunzilla with Off the Grid. These guys have been building for 5 years, like over $100 million invested. The team's 370 people now. The actual core devs behind it are the guys that built Warface and scaled that to 140 million people and over $1 billion in lifetime revenue. The creative direction is like Neil Blomkamp and Charlotte Copley. Made a ton of these legendary sci-fi movies like District 9, Chappie, Elysium. And then the writing for the 60-hour campaign is Richard Morgan, who wrote Altered Carbon, amazing book trilogy and Netflix show as well for those that haven't seen it. And so some of you guys may have seen, Off the Grid pop up on the feed lately because it made a massive splash with this big Twitch campaign with all the big streamers at launch. But yeah, it's sort of like firmly landed on the map of the like pro gamer circuit as well with this recent event they did called OTG All Stars, which is 600K prize pool, basically invitation only, bringing all of the biggest North American streamers. That saw it in like the top three most streamed game on Twitch once again, as did its launch week. And so I think we're basically on that grind up now to this being like, in the big leagues alongside things like Apex Legends, which anyone would regard as, a kind of big success from a numbers and a revenues perspective.
Off the Grid might be the first game that's built on chain that really does make it. I mean, I will say we have a meeting every morning at Milk Road where the whole team gathers called Crypto Newsroom, and we just talk about what's going on in crypto. And I don't remember the last time we talked about gaming, to be honest. And then a few weeks ago, somebody was like, yo, has anybody seen Off the Grid? And, usually the milkman would like laugh whoever brought this up out of the room, right? Like, it's like, come on, gaming, like it's not really there yet. But we really started to look at the numbers and everyone was like, oh shit, like this is really something. My main question is what I always get afraid of when any project blasts out of the gates. And it's very interesting to hear you say that they've been building for 5 years. So it's not like this is a meme coin that just came out of nowhere and exploded. It's so much more than that, obviously. But I always want to know how much of it is incentive based versus how much of this is like actually sustainable. People want to play the game regardless of these incentives. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, it's very simple in this instance. It's absolutely zero, right? There's like no incentive. There's nothing. There's no airdrop campaign. It's like the sheer virtue of the quality of the product, basically. I've got almost like 10,000 hours in the shooters, and I genuinely believe this is like one of the best shooter games I've ever played. It's pretty hardcore, right? Like you need to be rolling with the squad to be like super competitive at it. But for those that get into it, like the movement, the cyberlim systems, like this is a truly unique product. And so, yeah, it was very much by virtue of that. I think the only caveat to that I could share is that for like the user perspective, there's no incentives whatsoever. But like obviously they did a paid streamer campaign, right? This is not a revolutionary or new like go to market. Like lots of people have done it. Apex did it most famously back in 2019. But beyond that, there was a couple of paid streams to begin with. But it was insane to see these streamers who had been paid like every single night streaming way past their paid period, right? They were loving it. Yeah. And that's the kind of stuff you want to see. You want to see the biggest streamers in the world saying, holy shit, this is like Steam Marketplace, but cheaper and more transparent. And that this is just, basically improved marketplace technology. And so it feels like it really did cross that chasm that we've all been waiting for, which was, let's get the blessing of the mainstream, right? Like the big streamers are very much like the spokespeople for gaming a lot of the time. And we've got their blessing now. And so with that comes great responsibility, right? To follow through and deliver. And I'm spending a lot of time in the trenches with that team, and I'm very confident that that's exactly what's going to happen.
What are the numbers? How many people are playing the game?
So yeah, since launch they've hit like 11 million wallets basically, which is insane. Obviously, that's actually being underreported somewhat because first of all they had some like limitations around Xbox. They were stuck in the insiders program at launch, which was capped at like 70,000 people, which has since been lifted, and so they're now going to basically have there's like a marketing campaign happening with Xbox, which is pretty exciting. We're like at the point where you can see obviously every day like active wallets on chain. Those are sitting at like 700,000, I think. Need to double check that, but again, there's like so much technicalities that go into this, right? Because at the launch period, for example, in game, the way any asset enters the economy is you can loot these hex cubes, which basically you can take to extraction sites, and after the game, if you successfully extract them, you can decode them, which in the context of the game law is you basically downloading a 3D weapon blueprint and actually printing the weapon. And what it's actually doing is minting the asset on chain. And so during the launch period, they basically made it so like hex extractions weren't showing on chain basically to cope with the load and everything. And so once that gets turned back on again, for example, then those like active addresses are going to spike. But yeah, overall, incredibly pleased with the launch period. As I say, it's very much on everyone's radar now. And then yeah, clever marketing initiatives like this OTG All Stars tournament that's going to be running once a month with the 600k prize pool. You know, the real focus of that is to ensure that like pro gamers can actually build a career in it, as opposed to like, you know, having to go play these other tournaments elsewhere. And yeah, the way they've structured the prize breakdowns of that is like super impressive, right? So like if you win one of the 8 games, then your team gets like a 60k prize pool, I believe it is. So yeah, feedback from that was really strong. And obviously it's an iterative process. The one that's happening just after Christmas or around that time, very excited for as well.
Breakdown, what is the crypto blockchain component of the game?
So as I say, every single asset that enters that game economy comes from players looting them on the island. Teardrop Island, it's called, where the game takes place. And so
is it like Fortnite, the game? Like everybody drops into an island
it's a
and
battle
it's 100
royale,
people and battle royale. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. So it's teams of 3. Right now it's this extraction royale mode, so it's not full battle royale. There's 60 player lobbies. It's going to be 150 when the full battle royale enters. This extraction royale mode is similar to the resurgence game mode in Cardiff, if anyone knows that, which is basically if you die, that's not it. You're not out straight away. You basically have like a 30-second timer and you can keep dropping in until a certain point through the game's progression, at which point that shuts down basically. And so it promotes this like super high intensity to the game, which is great fun. But anyway, you loot these items, you decode them afterwards. They exist on chain basically. The full marketplace, you have like total transparency into everything, right? So like if I manage to, one of the things that I love, for example, like what this very simplistically already gives rise to is serial numbers, right? So basically every single item, like low serial numbers, just from the collector element of it, right, is something that people have always like strived for in games. It's like a cool thing where that exists. And so you have a monthly battle pass. It's called OTG Pro, which like has obviously a content track that you can progress through. Already something as simple as putting serial numbers and doing it on chain means that the grind every time the battle pass resets each month, if you're the first person to get to level 50 and the first person to mint whatever like that pack is, then you obviously get the low serial number. And so already it has like these cool dynamics that make it way more interesting and fun to play. And then, yeah, there's the very obvious fact that, you can withdraw those assets to like a third-party marketplace like Magic Eden or OpenSea and sell those. And so it's like probably the only battle royale in the world where you like paying for your monthly subscription. You can only pay, you can pay once. And if you're even remotely decent at the game, you never need to pay again if you don't want to. You can pay for your monthly battle pass subscription in the in-game token as well, in GUN, which you earn, for getting wins and extracting hexes, and obviously also selling stuff on the in-game marketplace. So, as I said, they're not trying to do anything like overly complex or ridiculous. They're like keeping it very simplistic in what the integration looks like. And that's what it looks like from the user perspective. From the investor perspective, which I think a lot of your audience might be interested in, there are these validator nodes that exist. And basically, there's 10,000 of them. They're NFTs. They have differing rarities, but they basically are the like in-game economy validators. And when staked, there's like pretty substantial, I think the target is something around like 30% of gross revenues end up flowing to these node holders. And so, when you zoom out and look at the competitor set of like, biggest battle royales in the world that are doing, $1 billion plus a year in revenue. I mean, obviously that's the high end, but that's, what we're going for with a game of this kind of product, like this kind of quality. it's like pretty substantial numbers that you start looking at, right? And so
Jesus,
I
that'd
think
be
that's
crazy.
yeah, I mean that's what's really cool, right? It's like owning like a piece of equity in one of these massive video games studios that's like, you know, liquid, and you can sort of have all this like insane insight into like, you know, obviously everything about the economy's function, marketplace, like you can see battle pass subscriptions on chain, all this kind of stuff. It's like, you know, it's like, what if we built a world-class game product and put absolutely everything out in the open and gave people a way to like, yeah, participate in the actual, you know, upside of that game? Like that's what this is.
That's what crypto is all about. Like you couldn't have defined the ethos of crypto better than that. Is it free to play? Can
Yeah,
anybody?
yeah.
Anybody can play the game.
Fully free to play. And so the parts that you need to, I mentioned that Battle Pass subscription, OTG Pro, it's like you've got to pay monthly. If you want to interact with like the marketplace, like if you want more loadout slots, like there's, you know, functionality that if you're like playing seriously, you're going to want to have. And that's like $12 a month subscription. So I actually think the like conversion funnel aspect to that is really strong, which I do like. But otherwise, fully free to play. And one thing I haven't emphasized yet, which some people like, I'd hope they're aware of by now, if they haven't heard of it, this is fully live on console as well. It's the first game to ever like bridge that gap, right? Like that's always been a huge like question mark. And unfortunately, obviously, it's never going to be revealed how that's done, right? Secret source. But it's exciting and it's huge validation and it's a huge testament to the hard work of the team. Because yeah, you know, the battle royale market is like one of the biggest gaming audiences out there, and the majority of it lives on console. And so obviously, yeah, live on PlayStation, live on Xbox, live on GeForce Now. You can play it on your freaking toaster, smart TV, mobile phone through cloud now. It's pretty cool. So yeah.
Piers, I want to come to your house and see what your house is. I imagine I walk into your house and you got like the Apple Vision Pro and you're playing a game, and you put that on, you walk over to your toaster and you're playing a game.
Pretty much. I got some weird shit around here.
You mentioned this a little bit at the beginning. Who built Off the Grid? Let's just dive into a little bit of the background of that. And you touched on it a little bit already, so I don't want you to repeat yourself, but tell us a little bit about the team behind it.
Yeah, so I mean, Gunzilla Games is the name of the studio, and as I say, these guys were running something called Crytek Kiev before, which basically worked on a game called Warface, which grew to 140 million people. The Crytek team had also worked on stuff like, you know, the Far Cry series, like Crysis games, had helped build like parts of the CryEngine, which was the gold standard in like game engine development at that time. And then, yeah, as I say, the really unique aspect I think is having, yeah, Neil Blomkamp and Shalto, who's worked with his entire career, like basically the entire visual aesthetic of that universe, this like grungy dystopian environment is like so fucking cool. So like the core premise of the game, the whole lore of it is that it's set, you know, in the near future. And basically there's this like IRL battle royale, think sort of like Hunger Games, that anyone can sign up for. And so you have everyone from freaking Navy SEALs to some gamer who thinks he's like, you know, has a chance at this stuff. And they can all basically go to compete in this like massive game show, this huge global phenomenon where there's like $100 million prize pool for whoever wins. And the only condition of entering this game environment is this IRL battle royale, is that you need to have all of your limbs surgically removed. So they take, you know, your arms and your legs, and it basically equips you so you can use these cyber limbs. And one of the cool revolutionary mechanics of Off the Grid is that instead of like having loadouts or perks or whatever, it all lies in the cyber limbs. So, you know, my left arm might be like a recon drone, my right arm might shoot like a, you know, like a Semtex, and my legs might allow me to run super fast or like jump super high. And so it unlocks this wicked dynamism, because as I'm going through the map, I might pull out my sniper, blow someone's arm off, they'll leg it, and I can switch my arm for theirs and keep moving. So like, it's a really clever, really fresh approach. That actually came from Vlad, the CEO and founder, that initial idea. But what I'm trying to emphasize here is like the depth of the world building and the lore, and kind of like the visual and creative direction overseen by Neil Blomkamp. It's something like truly special. Yeah, I mean, literally the smallest tip of the spear is what people have seen so far. I'm can barely contain my excitement every day about what's coming. So
I feel it, man. I feel it. The vibes are high. Okay, so are they crypto native? The Gunzilla team? Like, what made them build this on chain?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think from Vlad's side, right? Like he's, I think some of the earlier games he'd worked on, he wanted to take in this direction, and had been met with like corporate red tape and whatever. I think for anyone that spent a lot of time, you know, playing games and growing up with them, it's like obviously like higher player agency, economic agency is like something that's super fucking exciting. And so, yeah, that was like one of the core founding ideals around this, right? Of like, let's build something that is world class, and let's let's put that economy on chain and kind of like see what comes with that. And one thing that is super exciting as well is like, core to that whole thesis of like why putting stuff on chain is useful is like the whole idea is that basically people's willingness to spend is massively amplified when they know that there's some kind of residual value, when they know that they can actually own the stuff, when they can collect it, when they actually, as I say, are treated like an admin, not a user, if you like, with your inventories. And the idea is that these economies are going to grow way bigger than anything we've seen before as you open them up, and give users more agency. And obviously, bigger economy, more volume. There's also an increased surface area to monetize that, right? Obviously, marketplace fees, all sorts of other interesting dynamics that get unlocked with time. And so there is very much a business case as well as an idealistic one.
Yeah, incredible. What blockchain is it on?
So they built their own layer one, like using the Avalanche tech stack. It's called GUNZ. Obviously, people are always looking for, we see this like massive surplus of infrastructure, especially in gaming, right? In our research team's year ahead report, they identified that I think it was something like there are 106 new gaming chains, layer 1, 2s, and 3s launched to the 250 new games that were announced this year. And so obviously that's ridiculous. You have a lot of these infrastructure providers who are like, putting the cart before the horse. If you look at the history of like the traditional games industry and not even just gaming, right? Like it all starts with a big breakout application, right? So Half-Life 2 is what like gave rise to Steam, right? They like one day updated and became that. The same with Fortnite, one day updated and became the Epic Games Store. It's how you build ecosystems. Axie, right? That's how Ronin emerged, right? You need to start with the thing that aggregates a ton of players. And so what Off the Grid has here, what Gunzilla has here is very special, right? They've like done the hard part. They've built something that can attract a massive audience. And now the sort of empire, the ecosystem building is a very delicate line to walk. But very excited about the sort of curated approach that's going to be taken to like what the second, third, and fourth titles are on that whole ecosystem and tech stack.
We don't talk about Avalanche a ton on the show. Not like no disrespect to them. Great team, doing great things. Why did they pick Avalanche? Does this make you bullish on Avalanche?
I'm actually unsure about the initial reasons exactly. I think it was like the best combination of technical trade-offs at the time, but I don't know the ins and outs. Through this investment that we've made, I've been spending a lot more time with like the Avalanche team and the ecosystem and being, very, very impressed with what they've, been able to achieve. I think a lot of the stuff that they've got in the gaming pipeline, they've got some very heavy hitter titles beyond just Off the Grid to be paying attention to. And so, I think, I feel like the hard part's the really killer applications, right? And they seem to be doing a really good job of, nailing that.
Yeah, you nailed it. That's definitely the hard part, and that's the part that we all need. And paint a picture for us. So let's say Off the Grid is this game, and it continues to go the way it's going. What would that look like for GUNZ, the chain that their chain? How big would that chain become? How much volume and transaction could that chain get?
Yeah, so I think it was in either the opening weekend or the weekend that followed. And bearing in mind, like as I've alluded to earlier, like you can a lot of games can choose how much does or doesn't exist on chain, right? And you see a lot of projects just like register arbitrary actions on chain to boost transaction counts. The stuff that like does show up on chain for GUNZ and Off the Grid is like very conservative, I would say, right? It's like actual transactions, battle pass subscriptions, stuff like that. And so that hit about 4.5 million transactions in a 24-hour period during its launch week. And Base at the time had just hit its all-time high of like 6.5 million transactions, something around there. And so all of a sudden, like you have something that went from not on anyone's radar to bam, like this is like the third or fourth most used blockchain by transaction count, and granted for a period, but it's like, holy shit, it shows you how quickly that can change. And so if this keeps going the way I think it will, then, the path towards like, 10 million transactions daily, 15 million transactions daily, like isn't that far out. And as I've mentioned, right, opening up more platforms, more avenues to play, obviously more of like economy functionality coming online as well with different game types, all this kind of stuff. So I think it'll really get there. In terms of like, actual volumes on it as well, difficult to say, right? We need to kind of see once the token goes live, once all of the like marketplace integrations to allow users to take things out to other marketplaces and stuff. We need to see what happens with all of that. But yeah, obviously expecting this to be huge. Like if we zoom out for a moment and look at what the big like breakout consumer applications of crypto are, like, I mean, arguably the latest one was Pump.Fun, right? And you had all this hideous Black Mirror dystopian shit happening on live streams. We've learned the importance of actual moderation there. But, it's pretty undeniable that, yeah, like gaming as a consumer category is like the largest on the planet, one of the largest on the planet. And so, yeah, expect that to go very, very big.
You mentioned the token. So there's no GUNZ token now, but there is a token coming. Can you give us any details?
So yeah, there's the GUNZ, whatever you want to call it, is the chain. Gun is the token. There is a token that people are getting and are transacting on the marketplace right now, but it's still in testnet basically. And so all of those are going to be wiped when the full like mainnet migration happens. That's expected to happen soon is all I'll say. At that point, the gun token will be live. It very much is like the ecosystem token, like sort of utility token, like medium of exchange across this whole economy. And so, as that grows, I think it's going to be, very interesting to see what happens on the, price action and token front as well. But it's pretty obvious by now that this is like, biggest launch of the, in a long time and probably for the foreseeable as far as games go.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be far-fetched that we could be sitting here a year from now and GUNZ could be one of the most active chains in the world. Like it could be a top 10, top 5, maybe even a top 3 chain. I mean, it sounds crazy to say right now, but as you said, that they've done it one day. And if they can continue and get the activity and get the interest, and everybody's starting to make money from the game by playing the game, and it's a great. I mean, it feels like it's all lining up.
And, again, like second, third, fourth titles that launch on there, right? It aggregates, it builds on top. Right now it's settled at like just under 3 million transactions a day. But, I'm still expecting a lot of growth from here in terms of reaching that like steady state of like player audience. But yeah, as I say, like this, as an ecosystem, as an infrastructure provider, it's an incredibly attractive place for others to build, right? If you're building like a AAA facing product, you're like, okay, this is the ecosystem that's been validated by the streamers, by the mainstream gamers, that's been given the blessing to like that thing that was always crypto scam is now like, oh shit, this can actually improve the user experience here. And they've got through all of the approvals with PlayStation, Xbox consoles. Like this becomes a very attractive place for others to build. And so what you described as a hypothetical, I think is I'd ascribe a reasonably high likelihood of it happening. I'm very excited for it.
Let's go. Crypto and gaming. I can finally put it. I've had it on my prediction list for 3 years now, where every year I've said this is the year of blockchain and gaming, and it is yet to happen. But I feel like, Piers, I can put it on my 2025 list. Finally, it's going to happen.
Yes, sir. I mean, as I say, I think it has to, right? I think we're seeing lots of like smaller scale successes, and I don't mean like it's just smaller in terms of audience numbers, but they're doing incredibly well, right? If you look at like the Ronin ecosystem and what they've been able to achieve in terms of like amassing this massive audience who are incredibly crypto native, very like crypto competent, and adopt this very curated approach of bringing new titles onto the platform and channeling users into it and making sure all of those are winners, like that's been amazing to see. But that's like, you know what I mean? The OTGs of the world are the big flashy, like, oh my God, everyone like is, the sort of mainstream heads will turn. And kind of what I described at the beginning of that like spectrum of like degree of integrations, like a lot of the titles on something like Ronin, I think, it's hugely successful in their own right, definitely in terms of like, dollar outcomes, investments and stuff. But as I say, it's like slightly different types of audiences, I think, for these different ecosystems.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But one thing is certain is when we talk about consumer applications, gaming has the potential to grow very fast and reach the masses and reach people who are not crypto native and onboard them through pure account abstraction. They don't know they're using blockchain. They're just, I mean, I saw a video you posted of a streamer playing off the grid and basically like explaining to his audience on Twitch that this was on chain and why that made so much more sense. And it was fascinating to see. He's just like, yeah, they're just using blockchain as a tool. Like, duh, why wouldn't we do that? Steam, we're all using Steam Marketplace. Let's just use blockchain instead. And it's like, it's like that light bulb's finally going off in gamers' heads and they're finally understanding it.
Yeah, I can't stress enough what a big deal that is. I have tremendous conviction in the approach that Gunzilla has taken, and obviously the products. But even so, heading into that launch week, right, you're like, there are so many unknowns about how audiences are going to react. And like, if you look at the history of any even remote coverage of like crypto, blockchain, and gaming on YouTube or whatever, it's like littered with people that seem to like, take you to the stake or whatever over it. Yeah, very glad to see. I think that's like, I can't stress enough what a big, crossing that chasm. This has been like a huge fucking win this year. And excited to build on it.
Okay. We're going to pause here, Piers, and we're going to go to part 2 of this episode. So everybody tuning in, you guys are going to have to listen in again to hear part 2. Where we're going to talk about AI. We're going to talk about gaming and AI, but actually we're going to talk more about just AI and crypto because you've got some interesting thoughts on that. And that's something we've been talking about more and more on the show, and could be the biggest narrative, I think, of 2025, possibly. Everybody, thanks so much for tuning in today. Have a wicked awesome day. As always, if you liked today's episode, please hit subscribe and make sure you follow us so you don't miss out on the next one. There's also a link in the description to our free 5-minute daily newsletter where we simplify crypto for you while making you laugh. And if you're willing to step up your crypto investing game, we're going to also leave a link for Milk Road Pro. You get access to our portfolio where you can see exactly what we are buying. This is your number one resource to help you invest successfully in crypto. One final note, this show is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Investing in crypto or any asset is risky, and you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. Thanks so much for listening in, my friends. Have a wicked awesome day.